The Steady State Sentinel is produced by the Steady State, a community of former national security professionals who spent their careers safeguarding the United States, at home and abroad.
Today, we continue that mission by staying true to our oaths to defend the Constitution,
uphold our democracy,
and protect our nation's security. Join our expert hosts as they interview field-tested guests whose unique experiences shed light on the crises and challenges facing our nation. Hello, you're listening to the Steady State Sentinel from the Steady State. I'm Jim Lawler, a former senior CIA operations officer, and I've worked some of the most sensitive counterproliferation and espionage cases at CIA. Today we're talking with Tim Weiner. Tim is an American national security reporter and an author of 6 excellent books and co-author of a 7th. He's been a winner of the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award, and he has covered national security for 40 years, and I really am looking forward to this discussion. First, I'd just like to ask you, Tim, why did you decide to cover national security issues as a journalist?
My first assignment overseas, I was 29, was the stolen election and the fall of Ferdinand Marcos in February of '86. And of course, that's 40 years ago as we speak. We didn't know it then, but we can see now that that was the beginning of the end of the Cold War, a people power revolution that overthrew a dictator supported by a superpower. Next, I went to Afghanistan. It was under Soviet domination. This was the fall of '87. Before I left, I called up the Public Information Office at the CIA and said, hey, I'm going to Afghanistan. How about a briefing? And the fellow, Pete Ernest, later ran the Spy Museum, said, oh, absolutely not, hung up. Off I went to Afghanistan. And I got I ran with the Mujahideen, saw a Stinger fired in anger against a Soviet fighter jet. And I got back to Washington, hadn't been back for more than a day. The phone rings, and guess who? It's my new best friend from the CIA, Pete Ernest. And he says, hey, Tim, how was your trip? And I said, it was amazing. He said, how would you like to come in for that briefing now? And I did. And I walked into CIA headquarters, and most of you know that on the left-hand wall as you walk in is the Gospel of John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And at that point, I was hooked. I decided I was going to try and cover CIA like I had covered the cops or the courts when I was a cub reporter.
So you've covered these national security issues for 4 decades, as you've said. How's the current national security posture different today than in previous years?
Well, the President of the United States has swung a wrecking ball through the architectures of American national security that were established after World War II, 80 years ago, to protect and defend the U.S. and its allies against, among other things, Russian imperialism. The national security establishment of the U.S. is in great disarray. It is being run by, in my opinion, amateurs and toadies. And I believe that creates a very dangerous and difficult situation for our national security. When the instruments of the orchestra are in the hands of people who can't play, you get cacophony, and that ain't good.
I'd have to agree. In fact, your friend and mine, David Ignatius, wrote in the Washington Post a while back that Tulsi Gabbard, our current Director of National Intelligence, she could do one great service to the country, and that's to help abolish her agency, the DNI. Her job is to oversee the 18 sometimes very fractious intelligence units that in theory report to her. But because she had no experience in intelligence before taking the job, expectations were low. But she has even managed to underperform those expectations. Would you care to comment on David's analysis here?
Well, David Ignatius, being a polite man, a gentleman, didn't say what I think is obvious to any observer of the national security establishment, and that is that Tulsi Gabbard is a crackpot, a conspiracy theorist, and a danger to herself and others. She has now become the pointed spear of Donald Trump's conspiracy theory that the 2020 election was stolen from him. There is no possible justification for a national security or intelligence officer to be meddling in American elections. She's a threat to our democracy.
Sometimes I wonder if it's a choice between her or Laura Loomer, who would be worse. But I won't comment on that. I've always had the impression in years past that the FBI had a lot of positive press and the CIA a heck of a lot of negative press. But today it seems to be a toss-up or even the opposite. What do you think has changed?
Well, one thing that's changed is that you have another conspiracy theorist, the right-wing podcaster Kash Patel, running the FBI, and at Donald Trump's behest, damaging or even dismantling the national security and intelligence divisions of the Bureau. He's doing this because Trump believes that those people who are some of our foremost experts in national security and counterintelligence are deep state agents who are trying to overthrow him. At the FBI and at CIA, at Trump's behest, there is an ideological purge going on. And if you are not a Trump loyalist, you're going to be out of a job.
I think that's a pretty good assessment, Tim. Let's turn to some foreign affairs. I know certainly Iran has been in the headlines lately. What should our U.S. intelligence community be doing about the unrest in Iran? Should we just observe from the sidelines and shout encouragement? What do you think we should be doing? If you were the director of CIA, what would you be urging us to do?
Well, American political warfare in Iran has, as you know, an unhappy history. At the behest of Winston Churchill and Dwight Eisenhower, the CIA and British intelligence overthrew the Shah in 1953. And that worked until it didn't work. When the Shah fell, he was supplanted by the religious zealots who still run Iran. And any attempt by the United States, I think, to undertake political warfare or covert action would be, how can I put this politely, counterproductive. If the United States, and I doubt this, still stands as a beacon of democracy and freedom in the world, it should do what it can to support the people working for democracy in Iran among exiles. But it proceeds on two tracks, the U.S. and Iran, for decades now, including through covert action by the CIA. The United States and its allies have disrupted and in some cases dismantled the Iranian nuclear program through cyber warfare and other techniques. Dropping a bomb on its plant, that damage can be repaired. If you screw with their centrifuges, that's a harder hurdle for them to overcome. I don't have any great policy prescriptions that the present administration would be likely to follow.
Well, I think you nailed it when you said if the United States were still a beacon of democracy and freedom, just by setting an example, we might give people in Iran some hope. But I agree with you that messing in politics, if the people themselves don't want to do it, it has really been a sad history, something that is currently constantly bitten us in the you know what. What are your thoughts about Ukraine, and what should our national security strategy be there?
Well, Jim, as you know better than I, following the 2014 Russian attack on Ukraine, in which Russians seized the Crimea and the eastern Donbass, CIA was on the ground. And CIA officers in Kyiv and in surrounding countries have been essential to the survival of Ukraine as the Russians tried to crush it. It was an amazing coup of espionage by CIA under the leadership, the initial leadership of a DDO, the clandestine services chief named Tom Rakusan, whose roots are Czech, and who was 9 years old when Russian tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia to crush the Prague Spring in 1968. That the CIA revamped espionage against Russia, stole Vladimir Putin's war plans in 2021, and while the revelation of those plans of attack did not stop the war, they did have an immediate galvanizing effect on the nations of NATO. And CIA operations and American intelligence have been vital to Ukraine, but Ukraine cannot survive a president who aims to strangle it. And Donald Trump has all but cut off military support to Ukraine. At one point last spring, he cut off intelligence support to Ukraine. And this is a betrayal. The United States, the president of the United States, is betraying the people of Ukraine. And Jim, if Putin is allowed to keep 1 square kilometer of Ukraine by conquest, do you think he's going to stop there? He is waging covert war, political warfare throughout the nations of Europe through sabotage, subterfuge, propaganda, cyber warfare. He wants to restore the empire of Peter the Great. And with Trump having damaged or destroyed our alliances across the Atlantic, what we used to call the free world is in a weaker position to oppose Russian imperialism than it has been since the end of World War II.
This is a startling replay of 1938 in a certain part of Czechoslovakia that was called the Sudetenland, and certain dictators that wanted to reabsorb Germany. It's like Mark Twain said, maybe history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And I think that we're seeing that now. Let's turn to Cuba and Venezuela. Any comments on those two?
My sense is that what the United States has done in seizing Venezuela's oil, which seems to have been the only tangible result of the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro, is to strangle Cuba. I think the goal of both military and covert action in Venezuela has been to cripple or topple the government of Cuba. Now, presidents since Dwight Eisenhower have tried to do that through covert action, through all forms of political warfare, economic sanctions. And I think nothing would make Secretary of State Marco Rubio happier than to go marching into Havana waving the American flag. Doing this through covert action or through political warfare is complicated by the fact that the Cuban intelligence service, pound for pound, is probably the best in the world.
I would agree on a. I guess the only other one on a pound for pound basis might be Mossad of Israel, but they they see that as an existential threat to their regime, and it is. And so they're highly focused, and they have had incredible intelligence victories against us just in the last 5-6 years. So, what do you think about China?
Well, I have a kind of a narrow soda straw view of the problem of China and great power conflict with it. We're not doing pound for pound here. We're doing volume. The Chinese intelligence service, the Ministry of State Security, is, in terms of personnel, about 20 times bigger than CIA, roughly 400,000 people. And I think what the Chinese are doing, and they're playing a long game here, is to extend the all-pervasive surveillance state that they have created in China where there are somewhere upwards of 600 million closed-circuit TV cameras staring down at people, to extend that surveillance state into the United States, to have information dominance over the United States. As Xi said shortly after he took power 14 years ago, data is the new oil. The Chinese have stolen through espionage and through cyber espionage the personnel files of everybody who works for the United States, including everybody who's worked in the U.S. intelligence community, everybody's health insurance records. They have penetrated all the major telecoms. And if conflict or crisis or, God forbid, war comes, they will have information dominance. They will have mapped the battlefield. They know the human terrain of the United States, and that could be an existential danger.
I agree. In fact, my brother, Bill Lawler, who lives down in Gulfport, Mississippi, he told me that the Chinese are installing the latest state-of-the-art cranes at Gulfport and also on the West Coast and in a lot of our port facilities. Now, you think to yourself, now what could go wrong if the Chinese, in fact, are installing cranes at all of our major ports? So you've been an observer now of the national security community for those 4 decades, often a critic and sometimes a booster. And in fact, when people accuse you of being a critic, I say, as long as the criticism is fair and well researched, I'm perfectly willing to accept the criticism because by that, hopefully, we get better. But, anyways, if you were in charge, what would you be doing differently to strengthen our national security and also protecting our civil liberties and democracy?
Well, all throughout our history, there is an eternal tug of war between national security and civil liberties. We want to be safe and we want to be free. And what we are witnessing here, we're now 13, 14 months into the second Trump administration. What we are seeing is an attack on the rule of law. What we are seeing is an attack on free speech, on the free press, on the right of the people to peaceably assemble. And, I believe, and I've been saying this for a long time now, the greatest danger to the national security of the United States today is the president of the United States. Our national security depends on extremely talented people with years of expertise who know how to look over the horizon by gathering intelligence and this is a great challenge of intelligence, to anticipate surprise, to see what might be coming. You now have an ideologue in charge of the CIA, and ideology is the enemy of intelligence. You have conspiracy theorists running the FBI and the Directorate of National Intelligence, and you have an unabashed white Christian nationalist running the Pentagon and firing everybody who's a 2 or 3 or 4 star who's not a white guy. We are engaging in what the former CIA director, Bill Burns, who was the greatest diplomat of his generation, in what he calls strategic self-immolation. We are not shooting ourselves in the foot, we are shooting ourselves in the head. And I'll give you an example of what John Ratcliffe has done. In fact, I'll give you 3 at the CIA. As soon as he came in, ideological purity tests were imposed on people of high rank or seeking higher rank. You had to, swear allegiance to Donald Trump in addition to the Constitution. Ratcliffe then fired everyone the CIA had trained to be an operations officer and graduated from the FARM, the School for Spies, in 2023 and 24. He fired them because they were Biden hires. He then sent an unclassified email in their true names, first name and first initial, to the White House and to Elon Musk. I guarantee you that the Chinese can read the unclassified email systems of the White House, and a lot of these people are training up to spy on China. Strategic self-immolation. Then he abolished the CIA's diversity policies. Again, ideology. Why does the CIA have a diversity policy in hiring and has had one since the 1980s? Because it is not a great idea to send an all-white cadre of spies into China or Pakistan or Somalia. Diversity, as one of your old colleagues, Mark Polymeropoulos, has said, diversity was the CIA's superpower. It's how you don't get caught. To take these destructive, self-destructive actions in the name of ideology is counterproductive at best and dangerous at worst.
Well, let's imagine a miracle happening and you are turned into the director of CIA, a new administration, and you become, yes, you, Tim, you become director of CIA. What would be some of your programs, some of your moves in the first 90 to 120 days? What would you do?
Well, the first thing I would do is hire back Tom Sylvester. Tom was the DDO, the chief of the clandestine service. After the normal 2-year stint, he was set to take the traditional last post of the DDO, the last onward assignment, which is chief of station London. Radcliffe canceled that appointment, and Sylvester resigned in protest, and he canceled it, I believe, in part because Tom had given me an on-the-record interview at CIA headquarters, approved and vetted by the CIA itself, in which he spoke in the strongest possible terms about the need to support Ukraine. This ran counter to the foreign policy of the President of the United States, and that was the end of Tom's career. So I would hire him back to sweet. I would reverse the action of firing everybody the CIA had trained up to be an operations officer in 2023. That's mortgaging your future when you get rid of those people. And that's not a handful of people either. And finally, I would talk to the lawyers and re-examine the wisdom of the CIA's support for what has been a campaign of murder in the Caribbean. There is a moral hazard here, as well as a legal risk. Blowing civilians, whether or not they are drug dealers, blowing civilians out of the water is a war crime. It is murder, and the CIA should not be party to that.
It certainly brought back memories to me of the air bridge in Peru that was a disaster where a plane load of missionaries was shot down and at least 2 or 3 of them were killed. Mistakes happen. Well, that was a bad one. And of course, I also got very sick when I read about the 2 survivors that were then destroyed by a Hellfire missile, a few weeks ago. And I was thinking that's a violation, of the rules of war. I thought we were better. We are better than that. We should be better than that. And yet that really sickened me. Recently, I had Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiad, who is a professor at New York University. She's an expert on authoritarianism. She wrote the book Strong Men, which I've read and which is absolutely chilling. I'd like to say I enjoyed it, but I didn't. And in that interview with her, I told Ruth, I said, I'm sure you're familiar with the doomsday clock of the Federation of American Scientists. And periodically they speculate how close to nuclear Armageddon we are. So I said, if we had an authoritarian doomsday clock, meaning how close we are to midnight with an authoritarian takeover and a collapse of democracy, where would you put the minute hand? So I'll ask you that, Tim. And I know you're a strong believer in our democracy, and this must frighten the heck out of you.
1 minute to midnight, Jim.
That close.
We are in danger of losing our democracy. We have a president who cares not a whit for the rule of law, who cares not a whit for the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, who is interested only in grabbing things or destroying things. And just as he has destroyed the East Wing of the White House, which is the people's house, it's not his house, just as he's run a wrecking ball through the White House, he is running a wrecking ball through not only the architectures of American national security, but of our civil liberties. our rights as an American. And, you know, both my parents were refugees from Hitler's Europe. I do not want my daughters to grow up in a dictatorship. Um, and I am an optimist. I believe that the tide will turn. But I want to quote Thomas Jefferson here. I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever.
So let me ask you this. How can we turn that minute hand back? How can we, the people, we, the American people, how can we turn that minute hand back? What are you urging your friends, your daughters to do?
Well, to quote Joe Hill, don't mourn, organize. I think you're seeing the glimmerings of a tidal wave of newly engaged and enraged American voters who do not like the hate that the people in power in Congress and the White House are spewing, who love their neighbors and respect them, and who believe, as the scoreboard at the Super Bowl said during halftime, that love is stronger than hate.
Absolutely.
That the only thing stronger than hate is love. That is who we are, and that's who we will be again.
The one organization we didn't really discuss during this interview is that of ICE. Have you got any comments about that and their actions? I started to say that's not a national security issue, but in fact it is.
Well, I never thought I would live to see the day when masked armed thugs would murder American citizens in the street, would take American citizens and legal residents of the United States and warehouse them in what are turning into a nationwide network of concentration camps. It is an offense against the Constitution. It is a violation of the civil liberties of people. And whether you are a citizen or whether you are an immigrant here legally, you have inalienable rights. The courts are trying to push back, most of them. But the crisis in democracy that has been created by the president and his minions in Congress is an existential one, and I believe we have until the November elections to turn the tide back.
Are you optimistic about the November elections?
I am an inveterate optimist. I will not live in despair. And I learned that from my parents. And I teach that to my daughters. We live in hope, Jim.
That's all we have is hope, And when you were talking about these concentration camps and these raids, and it brought back echoes of Kristallnacht back in the 30s, when the Sturmabteilung, the stormtroopers, were beating up Jewish people and anybody they didn't agree with. It's so sad.
Jim, my mother lived through that.
Yeah.
She was born in the Jewish enclave of Nuremberg. And she fled with her family. She and her mother were trapped in Paris when Paris fell. They made it through great effort from Paris to Marseille to Casablanca. They got the second to last boat that ever crossed the Atlantic with German refugees. She was 2 years in a refugee camp in Havana, and then she heard about a program for young women like herself, and she was given a scholarship to Smith University, the most prestigious women's college in the country, and she became a very distinguished history professor. We live in hope. That's what America is, and I believe that's what America will be again.
Absolutely. But the sad thing is, if she were coming today in 2026, she probably wouldn't be admitted to the United States.
That is correct.
And that's tragic. Well, Tim, before we part here, I'd like to put in an endorsement of your book, The Mission, which was published last summer. Excellent book. Tim's, that's his second book on CIA exclusively. He's also written about the FBI and some other national security issues. But I heartily endorse The Mission by Tim Weiner. It's available on Amazon or in your favorite bookstore. So thank you, Tim, for joining us today. And if you like what you heard on today's show, please subscribe to the Steady State Sentinel wherever you get your podcasts and give us a 5-star review on Google. These subscriptions and 5-star reviews help us get this important content to the widest audiences possible. The Steady State Sentinel is for you, our listeners, and we want to hear from you. So stay informed, stay engaged, and join us next week for another episode of the Steady State Sentinel. For the Steady State Sentinel, I'm Jim Lawler, still standing watch.
Thank you for listening to the Steady State Sentinel podcast. Don't miss out on more insights and exposés from America's premier global security experts.
Also, subscribe to our Substack at substack.com/@steadystate1 and follow our social media. And join us right here next week for another exciting edition.
The Steady State is a nonprofit organization working to sustain our democracy and national security.
Join us and support our mission by visiting www.thesteadystate.org.